Picture the river nearest to where you live. You probably cross it without a thought, the water brown and ordinary under the bridge. But if you follow that water backward, past the cities, the farms, and the foothills, it eventually turns to ice on a plateau so high the air thins to half its weight. Around 50 million years ago, the landmass we call India drifted north and slammed into Asia. With nowhere to go but up, the Earth's crust crumpled and lifted into a scar of stone and snow. That collision built the Tibetan Plateau. Sitting at an average elevation of 4,500 meters, it acts as a massive atmospheric freezer. Scientists call it the third pole because outside the Arctic and Antarctic, there is no larger store of frozen fresh water on Earth. This map traces the geography that followed. 10 of Asia's greatest rivers, the Indus, the Mekong, the Yangtze, the Ganges, are born here within a few hundred miles of each other, flowing outward across the continent. The arithmetic downstream is severe. South Asia is home to more than 20% of the global population, yet it has access to only about 8% of the world's freshwater, and nearly all of that high ground is governed by a single country. China sits upstream of 7 of South Asia's mightiest rivers. Upstream means you drink first, you dam first, and you decide first. Through an accident of tectonic geography and modern borders, a single government holds a latent leverage over the water supply of nearly 2 billion people. Water only flows downhill. Because roughly 700 billion cubic meters of surface water pour off these highlands every year, whoever controls the source controls something more powerful than a military border. The tap doesn't need to be turned off. It only needs to exist. Look at the Mekong River as it drops out of the Tibetan highlands through China's Yunnan province. It passes through a staircase of around 11 large dams, structures capable of holding back the natural seasonal monsoons entirely. This chart shows satellite data from 2019. While the Chinese stretch of the upper Mekong received high to average rainfall, indicated by the blue bars here, the water arriving downstream fell to some of its lowest levels in recorded history. The rain fell, but the river did not arrive. Countries below the dams endured a severe wet season drought that collapsed local fisheries and left riverbeds completely exposed. 1,000 kilometers away in Vietnam's Mekong Delta, around 17 million people farm land that only exists because the river pushes back the sea. When the flow is held back, ocean salt water creeps inland, turning these green paddies brackish. Families who measure their wealth in harvests suddenly measure it by how far the salt has climbed into their soil and drinking wells. You can plant perfectly and govern well, and still watch your crop fail. That is the reality of living downstream. Your daily survival is tethered to decisions made behind distant concrete walls you will never see. Now follow the Brahmaputra River up to a canyon near Mekong, to a geographic choke point known as the Great Bend, where the water makes a violent hairpin turn. Here, China has announced plans to build the largest hydropower project in human history at this exact location. To understand the scale of that ambition, consider the Three Gorges Dam, which already forced the relocation of over 1 million people. The proposed structure at the Great Bend would dwarf it by a wide margin, placing a massive hand directly on the water supply for India and Bangladesh. And despite the sheer volume of water and the nervous nations involved, there is absolutely no legally binding treaty governing the rivers flowing out of Tibet. This map highlights the contrast. On the last, India and Pakistan share the Indus River through a formal, binding agreement that has survived decades of hostility. On the right, the Brahmaputra basin is managed entirely on trust. Fearing that Beijing will dictate the river's future, India has begun rushing to build its own large dams on its side of the Brahmaputra. The goal is to establish prior use, staking a legal and physical claim to the water before someone else does. The absence of international law has triggered a quiet arms race. Rival powers are pouring concrete into the rivers, trying to write permanent facts into the landscape before the other side can. But while these nations fight to control the high ground, the ice that makes the plateau matter is shrinking. This chart tracks the decline of the third pole. It is warming faster than the global average. Since 2000, China's glaciers lost over 10% of their mass, and the permafrost locking the highlands together shrank by 18%.
A glacier functions as a slow-release savings account for a river. It captures water as ice during the freezing months and weeders it out slowly through the warm season to the settlements below. Drawing down that account creates a cruel paradox. In the short term, faster melting means sudden, catastrophic floods, swollen rivers, and bursting mountain lakes overwhelming levees downstream. But once the ice that took thousands of years to build is gone, the swollen rivers will reverse course. The flows will permanently shrink, leaving farms and cities without enough water to survive the dry season. The very geography that gives one country extraordinary leverage over its neighbors is steadily destroying the resource that leverage is built upon. Control over the plateau is a temporary advantage on a changing map. The defining challenge for Asia's future is whether its nations can find a way to share the source before the ice that makes it matter is gone.